In the 90s, I worked as an innovator at Motorola, one of the greatest companies in the world. We brought cell phones, microprocessors, and lithium-ion batteries to the world. And as an innovator, and in a company like Motorola, we used to try and forecast what was the next big thing which was going to happen. We had to figure out what new technologies, what new products, what new businesses were going to be out there next. And when we forecasted what was going to happen, and we forecasted when it's going to happen, what we found again and again, that we nailed it on what was going to happen. But we missed on when. Again and again, we thought things would happen sooner, but it took a lot longer to happen. Fast forward one decade into the last decade that we are living in, and here I worked with big corporations as a consultant, as an innovator, and helping them innovate. And again, we tried to forecast what was going to happen and when it was going to happen. And in this case, repeatedly, whatever we forecasted, what was going to happen, happened exactly when we predicted it was going to happen. And this brings us back right now. For the first time, whatever we are forecasting as to what's going to happen is not exactly what's happening. It looks very different. And even more difficult, when is it going to happen? It's happening much sooner. And so in this world that we are in now, how do companies, corporations, innovators stay ahead and not be disrupted? It took about 70 years for Motorola to disappear. It took about 20, 30 years for Nokia and BlackBerry to disappear. We've already seen Airbnb begin to displace hospitality. We've seen Uber displace taxis. We're seeing Netflix disrupt the cable industry. And the players are coming from somewhere else, and we don't know where they come from. And we don't know how quickly they're going to basically change the game. And so, never before in the history of time has it become more important for a company to be innovative and to innovate even faster than before. The very guys who disrupted the dinosaurs of the past are now in fear. The innovators of today are in fear of becoming dinosaurs tomorrow. So the question is, how do we innovate faster? How do we become better at getting ideas sooner into your organizations and to be able to implement them? And so when we look at that, we see people like Steve Jobs who say, innovation is those who are able to see the dots faster and to be able to connect them, to be able to see the picture, the big picture, and then take action on that. And when we look around, we know those people. You know those people that you work with, and there's some of you out there who are able to connect the dots just faster. You're able to connect the dots faster and to be able to show that picture of what could be next, and then take action onto this thing. And we have got used to this expression of the lone genius. The lone genius was able to do that. But I think there's something else there. And so over the last 10, 15 years, I've been on a mission saying, how do we democratize innovation and bring this very art that these people have, the art of connecting the dots and connecting the dots faster, to make it available to all of us. So two questions come out when you think about this. And the first question is it possible that those who are able to connect the dots faster already had more dots? And the second question to ask is it possible that those who are connecting the dots actually have some sort of methodology in their heads, some sort of techniques in their heads, which allows them to connect the dots faster and better than other people? And so let's double-click on those two questions. Imagine a night sky in Boston, city lights everywhere, and you look up in the sky. And tonight's going to be a fantastic night. Right? When you look up there, what do you see is, let's say, 3 stars. And if I ask you to connect it, what do you get? You probably see a triangle. Let's add another dot up there, another star. And you look up in the night sky, what do you get? Probably a square or rectangle. Now let's move you across the continent into the desert of Arizona, a cold night, clear night, and you look up in the sky. And what do you see? An amazing mosaic of stars everywhere. When you look up there, it's no surprise that those who came before us, when they looked at it, they saw bears, they saw eagles, they saw warriors, they saw Orion. There's no way I can tell my son today to look up at the night sky in Boston and say, that is Orion, and there's a warrior there. And that's the difference in perhaps having more dots, and therefore you might be able to connect them to see new and better things. The next part of the story then is connecting the dots. So let's go back into Boston, and I ask you, let's look back in the night sky at the 4 stars. And the first set of connections you came up with was probably a square. Let me ask you to try it one more time. Connect it in a different way. And when you do that, I'm going to assume that you saw something different than just a rectangle. Now, let me be hard and ask you, no, do it one more time. Do it one more time. And if I ask you another time, you'll see there's some sort of change from that boring rectangle that you came up with. Something better, something different, and eventually doesn't look like the same thing as the person next to you. And so in there, as you did that exercise, you started breaking some rules, some orthodoxies, that dots don't need to be connected as a straight line. Dots can be connected perhaps diagonally. Perhaps the line could be curved. Perhaps you could add some more dots in there. And as you go through that exercise, you suddenly realize that perhaps if you had more dots, if you had better dots than people around you, then you might be able to create better pictures. And if you had the same dots as everybody else, and you had the resilience to try and connect them and reconnect them and reconnect them, and one more time, reconnect them in a different way, then perhaps you will be able to come up with something that's different and better than the person sitting next to you. And that's, in simplicity, the whole big idea. Then how can we increase the innovation quotient? How do we move from an art called innovation into a science and make everybody innovate like a genius? So we ran an audacious experiment. This is audacious. We met with 60 companies, 60 Fortune 500 companies, and the senior level executives, and we said, we can help you identify your next big future for where you're going to grow. And they said, yeah, right. And he said, and just to make it even harder, we're going to do it with 25 students who know nothing about your industry, who know nothing about what your products are, and they probably don't even have the knowledge about your marketing, your manufacturing, or your engineering. What are the odds of success? And you can imagine the CEOs of those companies raising their eyebrows. And we work with companies, Alibaba in China, Lufthansa in Germany, Johnson Controls in Milwaukee, Natura in Brazil, just to make sure this experiment could be tested around the world. So we formed the teams. The CEOs agreed to do the project. 60 companies at the same time, all across the world. And the team started working on it. And the first thing those teams were supposed to do is get more dots. Simple as that. And they started brainstorming. And you guys have all heard about the word brainstorming, right? Everybody does brainstorming. Whatever's in your head, write it on a Post-it. Well, unfortunately, if what's in your head is 3 dots, well, guess what? You're not going to get a lot of dots out of that person. And so, first thing we said is to go ahead, get those dots out. And when the teams looked at that, they said, this is not going to work for us. We don't know much about this industry. And they said, okay, now let's put some madness, remove the madness and put some science into this thing. Let's go talk to people inside the company, in manufacturing, in marketing, in sales, in the different areas of the company, and go get more dots. The students did that. And boy, did they feel proud, because their night sky, which looked like Boston, had suddenly turned into something which might be in Iowa, not Arizona yet. Right? And they're pretty proud of what they had done. And they said, we're done. I think we can now connect the dots. They said, we've got to work a little harder. Let us talk to the customers. Let's look at the suppliers. Let's look at the channels and everywhere else. And they did that. And again, they're feeling good now. They're saying, we feel pretty smart about this thing. And I said, can we start connecting the dots? And it's like, you got to work harder. I said, let's go look at the competitors. Let's look at the substitutes. And let's look all the way around the ecosystem. I said, seriously? More work? And I said, yes, more work. Let's go get more dots. And they did that also. And then the last place we looked for dots was in the past and in the future. This is something we used to do at Motorola all the time. We used to watch Star Trek. And from Star Trek, we got ideas of Star Tech, the phone, the doors which open by themselves, the RFIDs. And all those ideas came from science fiction. And we said, go get ideas from science fiction also. And they got more dots, at which point they were saying, what are we going to do with all these dots? Looks like Arizona night sky now. And their head's about to explode, too many dots, right? So then we said, let's group those dots together in some sort of structure of dots of marketing, dots of channels, dots of products, dots of business models, dots of technology. And they said, that's helpful. There's a relief in that structure. And then I said, let's see what it looks like. And even I could come into that meeting next and say, let's take that dot of marketing with that dot of this channel, with this offering, and this technology, and this business model, and put it together, and that's my big idea. And hence, we democratized the dots for everybody to use. And probably any monkey, including myself, could connect the dots now. Right? So these teams then basically connected the dots. And very quickly, the first time they connected the dots, the teams basically said, got it, I got a great idea. And guess what I said to them again? Let's think about it tonight, let's come back again, and let's reconnect it one more time. Disconnect and reconnect. And they said, wow, we don't want to do that. We love our idea. I said, don't fall in love with your first connection. Go back and disconnect it. And then we got in the habit of connecting and disconnecting, connecting and disconnecting. Let's fast forward into the meeting in the boardroom. Across the world, 60 companies, presentations are going in the boardroom. And the student teams are presenting to the board and CEO, saying, here's what we want to do. 5 teams for each company. In every company, on average, statistically, one company blew up. Basic dysfunctionalities in the team, dysfunctionalities in the way they were working, and terrible result. And there I'm sitting and saying, this was a bad experiment. Right? But the good news was 3 of the teams came up with ideas which were like, the board and the executive team looks at each other and says, how did they find out? How did they know we were working on those ideas? How did they know that we've been talking about that? And as a result, they said, we better start moving quickly, because if a bunch of students can come up with this thing, then so can our competitors. And then the one team just gets up there and basically hits the ball right out of the ballpark. And the CEO looks at it and says, wow, that's an amazing idea. We need to work on this. My company's not even organized to chase after this. We have to talk more, but this is the one which will change the game. So the message I want to send over here in this conversation is, we took 60 companies which are completely different across the globe in different industries. We took 300 student teams, and on each team, 5 students, 1,500 students, and we basically says, guys, go out there and get more dots. And if you work hard on it, and if you get more dots than everybody else, you might be able to make a better picture than everybody else. And then don't rush into connecting the dots. Connect, reconnect, reconnect, and you'll probably come up with something else. And that was the declaration of a victory on that. Now I want to bring it back to you. All of you have heard of that person who was taking a shower and then jumps out and says, I got my idea taking a shower. You know that person. There's a person out there who was driving his car to work, and on the way to work, he came up with that Eureka. And he said, yep, on the way to work. Or there's another friend of yours who actually was sitting at breakfast and wrote his idea on a napkin. My goodness, aren't those geniuses? The reality is, all those geniuses have been working 3 months before that very, very, very hard, getting more dots. And those dots are in their head shaking around, just shaking around, not knowing when and how they're going to connect perfectly in a way that when they do get together, you say Eureka. And so from now on, whenever you hear somebody says, I got my Eureka, be clear, it wasn't easy. It was a hard work to get more dots, and it's even harder to be able to connect and reconnect to be able to get your big ideas. So with that, what I would like to ask you to think about is, as you talk to your kids, As you talk to your teams, as you even look at yourself and look at your companies, the question is, are you guys working hard to get more dots? And are you building the resilience and the patience and the persistence to be able to connect the dots and unconnect it and reconnect it and reconnect it and unconnect it? And when everybody else stops, you do it one more time to find a solution that wows customers, makes competitors say, I can't copy, and the executive team says, we have to make it a real thing. Thank you very much.